got quite the full house tonight. So first things first, the one thing that I want to let you guys know is that the very first presenter that we're having, and I know I kind of detailed in one of the emails, but he's going to be actually remotely connecting from Calgary. So he is going to be able to take questions from you guys. But one thing that I just really want you to keep in mind is that because of the room that we're in, he's going to be able to pick up quite a bit of noise. So if you guys have a lot of shuffling papers around and that sort of thing, especially because that's the way this room is designed for acoustics. So just kind of keep that in mind, especially with whispered conversations and things like that, because we don't want him to pick that sort of thing up. So without too much more plum, I'll get right into it. So the first Chinook Challenge of 2016. So this is our 12th annual challenge. And this is just an agenda of what we're going to be going over tonight. So I'm going to give you a really brief introduction to the challenge, introduce who I am, that sort of thing, so you guys know who's yapping at you. We're going to have a presentation, the first one by Craig Elias, who I just mentioned, who is an absolutely fantastic entrepreneur and salesperson. I sent you guys a brief bio on him, but Craig is probably, in terms of salesmen, Forbes named one of the most 15 influential salespeople in the world. And I mean, this guy, to hear him talk, it's absolutely phenomenal. And when he's talking about sales and talking about clients and talking about customer acquisition, this is the kind of guy that has done it and has done it very successfully. So it's a really great thing for us to be able to have him in. Then we're going to have a really brief break, and we're going to jump into another presentation by MNP. And this is another one that I'm really excited about. All in, we're going to have over 50 years of accounting experience in the room that you guys can ask questions to. And I can tell you, I see entrepreneurs every single day. Accounting is one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. So kind of use this to your advantage. And then we're going to have a really brief conclusion. So just a little bit on the challenge itself. Who am I? My name's Jason. I'm the project coordinator for the Chinook Entrepreneur Challenge, and I work for Community Futures here in town. For those of you who don't know what Community Futures is, we're a not-for-profit organization. We're funded by the federal government, and we're all about small business and rural economic development. So we do advising, we do lending, we run programs like this to really make sure that entrepreneurs, especially in our area, have every advantage that they need to start the business that they want to start. Why are we here? The Chinook Entrepreneur Challenge. Chances are, because you guys are here, you already know what the CEC is. But just in case you don't, we're going to go through that real quick. So it's 8 weeks of training. This is the training schedule that we have right now and the dates that we have right now. It's going to be the same night every single week in the exact same room here at the university for 2.5 hours. Every week we bring in a special presenter who knows what they're talking about, is really passionate about what they're talking about, and a lot of times has industry, real life experience in that specific thing. So those are the actual training sessions that we're going to have. If you guys have any questions, you can always ask me about it as well. The actual competition. These are just some really brief outlines of what the competition is going to look like this year. So after those 8 weeks, you guys get the opportunity to submit your business plan to the competition. The deadline this year is April 21st. I didn't put on there, but it's 2 p.m. If you guys, and that includes upload time. So if you guys have a long time in getting your submission up, if it's going to take a while, do it before 2:00 p.m. on April 21st. And I'm probably going to say that 100 times throughout this presentation because it is so important. If you're even a minute late, we cannot accept that submission. That's the rules of the challenge, and we had to pick some time, so 2 p.m. is the cutoff for that. It's all online through the CEC website as well. My recommendation is you do it kind of within the couple weeks prior and get a hold of me just in case there are any issues. And then we go to the screening and judging process. So for the screening and judging, we bring in professionals that work in finance and industry. They're some of our sponsors. There may be accountants, maybe lawyers that know a lot about business. They're going to take a really critical look at the business plans that you guys do. And if you get through to the judging process, then you actually go and get to speak to them Dragon's Den style and get real feedback on your business from professionals in the Lethbridge area. We're going to have an awards dinner on June 1st, and at that awards dinner, that's where we announce all of our winners. And this year, there's over $60,000 in cash and in-kind prizes. And I can't tell you guys enough how much that means to a small business owner to get free advertising or to get cash to put into their business. If you ask anyone that's ever run a business, the best kind of cash you can get is free. So that's where it starts. You don't have to give anybody anything. You don't need to give up your company. So that's what we're here to do, is to help you out with that. So without too much further ado, I'm going to actually switch right over to Craig Elias so that he can get to his presentation. Just bear with me for a moment here while I get him up. And Craig, are you there? Uh-oh, that's
I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can sure hear you. Perfect. And
So I'm going to get rid of this. share my screen. Share this over here. There you go. So I can see what you can see, and it looks like we're.
Okay,
on my path. Let me
just give me 1 second here, Craig. We're just switching over so your presentation is showing.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's not supposed to happen.
So while we're getting that ready, I'll go into a little bit more detail about Community Futures, and more particularly, I'm going to talk about the support for entrepreneurs in our area. I've worked in finance in the banking world. I've worked for big companies like GE and things like that. And in terms of entrepreneurship, this area has so much support for entrepreneurs through organizations like RINSA, who we're going to be partnering with, and you're going to hear from Bill Halley is his name, who is an absolutely phenomenal gentleman in terms of supporting entrepreneurs in this area. And we're really going to give you an idea of the support network that you have. And so the hope is by the end of this challenge, you guys are going to know, if you don't know the answer to the question, who to talk to that'll be able to get you the answer to that question. And with that, Craig, it looks like your presentation is back up here. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm on.
Perfect. Your presentation is up and ready to go on our end, and I'll let you know if we have questions on our end as well, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Nobody feels like talking to you.
So I have 2 things on the go. You can text me because I have my phone in front of me, and I also have the application up and running on my phone. So if there's a question through that, I should be able to see it. So good evening, everybody. My name's Craig Elias, and I'm here really for 3 reasons. So when I was given the chance to do this, I said, how do I make the biggest difference? And one of the hardest parts about being a startup is actually getting customers. So I'm going to share with you the magic of what I call timing, just showing up in front of the right people at exactly the right time. I'm going to hopefully turn on this thing called selective perception. There are these things that hide in plain sight, and once you know what you're looking for, you will see them all over the place. It's just like when you buy a new car, what do you see all over the place? You see that car. When you sell that car and you buy a new one, you stop seeing your old car, you start seeing the new one. When you break your leg, everybody's on crutches. When you get pregnant, right, everybody's pregnant. So I'm going to turn on selective perception. The other reason, though, I'm here is because I want you to jump. I want you to take the opportunity that you have in front of you, and I want you to do something with it. So my name's Craig Elias, and for about 20 years, I was just a lucky sales guy. I had this unbelievable knack of just showing up in front of the right people at exactly the right time. And it happened everywhere I went for pretty much 20 years. And then one day, the day before 9/11, I joined a brand new firm. And I don't know how people were trying to sell stuff in the post 9/11 environment, but it was really hard. No one was buying anything. But just like always happened, I got lucky. Within 6 months, or less than 6 months, I was actually the #1 sales guy in the entire country. The unfortunate thing was the company that I went to work for was a company called WorldCom. 21 days later, they admitted to conducting $11 billion, with a B, $11 billion in accounting fraud. I went from 0 to 0 in 21 days. And for the first time in my life, nobody would buy from me. And I couldn't figure this out, so I waited until August, and I had some holiday time. So what I did was I took a month of afternoons and I reflected on my luck or success as a sales guy. And I figured a few things out. And based upon what I figured out, I decided that I was going to start my own company. And I created a company called InnerSell, INNERSELL. And I launched the company in May of 2003. I had it up and running for about 5 months when someone I used to work with in Vancouver called me up one day and told me about this contest on the internet for $1 billion business ideas. And it was hosted by a guy named Tim Drapery. I don't know how many of you ever used Hotmail, but the way Hotmail came to be is a couple of guys went to this very famous venture capitalist named Tim Draper and shared with him their idea for a business. And the way I heard the story is Tim basically says, well, that idea sucks. Do you have anything else you're working on? And they said, yeah, we've got this idea for free email. Tim says, wow, free email? That actually might be a really good idea. So he gives them $600,000. And less than 2 years later, Hotmail got sold to Microsoft for $660 million. And not long after that, a couple of guys from Estonia showed up in Tim's office. And they said, remember that free email that was a winner? We have an idea for a free long-distance phone call, and we call it Skype. Tim's like, wow, free email, that was a good idea. Free long-distance phone calls, you actually might be right, it might be better. And he gave them $20 million. And less than 2 years later, it got sold to eBay for $4.5 billion. So he's looking for ideas he thinks might have potential. So he has this contest. It's on the internet. The way you get into the contest is you enter 1,500 characters, not words, 1,500 characters on a homepage. And I had a pretty simple idea, and I didn't want people to borrow my idea. So I put up something, but not too much, and they were intrigued enough, they actually phoned me and said, okay, you got our attention, but you had to give more detail actually on the website. So I put up more detail, and I went around Calgary telling all these people that I think I could be in the top 10. Because if you make it in the top 10 of this competition, what you get is you get a chance to pitch to this guy over a webcam for 5 minutes. Now, we might all have webcams now, but this is in 2003. 2004, sorry, my apologies. No, 2003. It was in 2003. So if you get in the top 10, they actually send you a webcam. So I went around Calgary telling all these senior people that I knew that I think I'm going to be in the top 10, and they said, never happened. They were right. But, funny thing happened. Tim Draper, for whatever reason, instead of picking 10 companies, he picked 11. And I was the 11th. And now I get my 5 minutes of fame. And I warned well in advance that I don't get 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't get 5 minutes and 20 seconds. I have 5 minutes. He's got these all lined up. That's all I have. So I practiced my pitch, and I practiced my pitch, and I practiced my pitch, and I got it down 5 minutes and 8 seconds. And I thought to myself, that's really not a problem, because all I'd have to do is talk a little faster, and I'll make that extra 8 seconds up the day that I go to present. So the day of the presentation, I actually was in the main room at Innovate Calgary, and I start pitching my idea, and I'm 30 seconds into my pitch. And this guy named Tim Draper starts asking me questions. And all I could think to myself is, shut the up, because I only have 5 minutes. So what I learned is that I had hooked his attention in 30 seconds. And within 30 seconds, he was asking me these questions, and I actually had to work really hard to sort of ask him for the money. The last piece of any pitch should be an ask. In that case, I was asking for money. And they liked the idea so much, they said, okay, here's what we want. We want you to send us a business plan. Now, I had gone through a self-employment learning program. I had a business plan that was reasonable, but it was not tier 1 venture capitalist ready. So the guy who made me aware of the contest, his name is Dory. I phoned him up. He took a week of vacation. He drove to Calgary. We spent a week on my business plan. I got to them. I promised they would have it by Friday at midnight. I got to them by Friday midnight Pacific time, because they're in California. Saturday morning, Tim Draper's assistant phones me up and said, we've read the plan. It's pretty interesting. Here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to send us a pitch deck. So when you get a chance to pitch, you may have 7, 8, 10 slides, but it's basically how are you going to pitch this? So I sent the pitch deck. They asked for a use of funds spreadsheet. So basically financial analysis. If I get the money that I'm asking for, how would I spend it? What's their investment worth? What I've done. So I get them that on Sunday night. On Monday, they phoned me up and said, so far so good, here's what we need. We need 3 references. So I phoned very quickly around Calgary, got 3 references. They phoned me up on Tuesday morning and said, Craig, here's the deal. You have an opportunity to pitch to all the partners in the firm on Thursday. You need to get to our offices for Thursday at 10 o'clock. Now, I'm 40 years old. I'm an entrepreneur. First-time entrepreneur. What do I need right about now that I don't have much of?
Money.
Money. So at the age of 40, I phoned my dad. I said, Dad, I need to bum $1,000. I got to go down to California. I think I'm going to win $1 million. Now, I don't know if my dad thought I was crazy, but I'm lucky enough that my dad loves me, and he gave me the $1,000. Dory, who made me aware of the competition to help with my business plan, he actually phoned Air Canada, used his air miles, and he got me a flight down to San Francisco. So I go down to San Francisco. I show up at their office at 10 o'clock, and it's two junior people, and I start my pitch. And because they said, well, someone else will be in a little while, so let's just get started. I think they were there to check me out to make sure it was real before this guy named Tim Draper and all the partners in the firm actually showed up. So I go for about 30 minutes, and they say, Craig, the pitch deck is great, but you just have this knack when you're at the whiteboard. Just have a conversation. Use the whiteboard. Forget your pitch deck. So they leave, and then a few people show up in the firm, and I start my presentation. And I'm going through, and then I'm about 10 minutes in when Tim Draper himself finally shows up in the meeting. And Tim says, okay, where are we? And I do a really quick recap, and I keep going with my pitch on this whiteboard. And then about 10 minutes later, a guy named John Fisher walks in. So there's three primary partners in this venture capital firm. It's called Draper, Fisher, Jurvetson. Tim Draper, lead guy, people person. John Fisher, number 2, he's the numbers guy. Steve Jurvetson, number 3, he's the technology guy. So John Fisher walks in the room, and he says, okay, where are we? And before I can say anything, Tim starts telling John about my idea. What is my job right about now? What's the only thing I need to do?
Listen.
Shut up. Right? Tim is telling John my idea. So at the end of the meeting, they send me on my merry way. They ask me when I have to go back. I tell them I have a 12 o'clock flight home the next day. They said, we'll get back to you. Don't worry about it. So the next morning, I'm actually having coffee with a guy at what's called the Stanford Cafe, right outside the university. And at 9:30 in the morning, Tim Draper himself phones me on my cell phone. And he says, Craig, I have a small problem. There's a partner in the firm. Her name is Jennifer. You haven't seen her, and she wants to see you before we make a decision. Now, the problem I have, he says, you got to come into the office. You need to come see Jennifer. The problem I have is it's about 45 minutes from there to Tim Draper's office. From his office to the airport is at least another 30 minutes. My flight is at noon. I'm supposed to be there at 10. All I could think to myself is I'm going to have to phone my dad and bum another $1,000. So I go to Tim's office, and basically he walks in the room and he says to me, Craig, here's the deal. I'm going to give you the $1 million. But you have to do 2 things for me. You have to move yourself and your company down to California. Now, at the time, I was 40 and single. When I was working for WorldCom, I was engaged to somebody, and when they admitted to conducting the $11 billion in accounting fraud, she came home and said, there's no security in my job. She wasn't going to have kids. We've been together for 6 years. I knew I wanted to have a family. She wasn't sure. And then what ended up happening is 3 weeks later, we went our separate ways. But life always seems to happen. So when I got into this contest, just as I get in, I meet a lady. Her name is Heather. We're now married. We have a 10-year-old son. But at the time, I had to move. She plays French horn for the orchestra in Calgary. She has to stay. So I had to convince the youngest daughter of a minister, that she should try and have a child with a guy who lives in a different country, because it might just work out. So luckily enough, I'm a good salesman. That's what happened. I commuted back and forth for every other week, and 6 months later, my Heather, who's now my wife, got pregnant, and I came back home. I am a big believer of LinkedIn. I don't know how many of you are on LinkedIn, but I am user 3,956 out of 400 million users. I think my 13-year anniversary happens in, I think it's May, so I'm all like, what, 4 months away.
New participant has joined the conference.
I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, do me a favor, send me LinkedIn connection request. What happened when I came back, I kept getting asked to go share what I learned in that summer of reflection, but I wanted to focus on being a stay-at-home dad. So I decided that what I would do instead was take everything I figured out and put it in a book. When the book came out, it won an award. It's one of the top sales books of the year. If you send me a LinkedIn connection request, I'll actually send you back a link where you can go get a free copy of the book. Along the way, I've been very lucky. I've had coverage on New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and NBC News. I am involved in a very cool program down in the United States put out by Goldman Sachs. It's called the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Program. They are helping 10,000 small businesses in the United States create what they call a growth plan. Not so much a business plan, but how are you going to take the business you already have and how are you going to grow it? And what they do is it's a scholarship, you apply. It's only available to Americans, unfortunately, so far. You apply, they fly you to Boston. You get to spend a week at Babson College, which is the #1 place in the planet to go learn entrepreneurship. Then they send you home for 10 weeks, and then you go back for the last week. And the 10 weeks while you're home, keep you on the straight and narrow, they give you growth advisors. So they have 22 growth advisors scattered throughout, they have 22 growth advisors. 21 of those are scattered throughout the United States. They have 1 Canadian. I am that guy. I am also the entrepreneur resident at Bow Valley College. And we do a few cool things on campus. One of the things we do, we run a competition very much like what you guys do. It's called Venture Quest. It's just the students. Our finals are actually next week. We gave away $40,000. We have an event we do every other week on campus called Wannabe Wednesdays. So what we do is we invite the first, we do it every 2 weeks. So the first one in the month, we invite a successful social entrepreneur to come tell us how they became successful. And then 2 weeks later, near the end of the month, what we do is we take a startup social entrepreneur, and they come to us and tell us what they're trying to get done. And the students then take what they've learned from other people and what they've read on their own, and what they've taken in school, and they pass it on to these startup social entrepreneurs. And when I use the word social entrepreneur, it's basically somebody who finds a way to make a difference while they make a living. Another cool program we run on campus is called Student Connections. What we do is we take any small business who would like some help. As long as it's a project that's 10 hours or less, we match them with a student who would like experience doing exactly that. The small business gets the help, the students get the experience. So if you want some help, by all means, send me an email. I'll give you my contact information at the end. I'll do what I can to help. But I'm hoping that everybody in the room was savvy enough to come with a pen and a piece of paper. So this is where I'm going to ask, if you brought a pen and a piece of paper, if you don't have it out, bring it out. Because I'm going to ask you to do something. Now, Jason.
Yep.
Does everybody have a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper?
Pretty close, yeah.
Pretty close. Good. So here's what I'm going to ask everybody to do. For all of you that are right-handed, what I want you to do, I want you to put the pen or pencil that you got, I want you to put it in your left hand. And if you're left-handed, you know what's coming. I want you to put it in your right hand. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write out your full first name and your full last name with your wrong hand. Full first, full last, wrong hand. So this is scribed, script, cursive. This is not printing. Maybe, Jason, you can tell me when you're done writing your full first name, last name with your wrong hand, maybe just put your hand up. And Jason, just tell me when the majority of the room is their hand up.
Okay, the majority has their hands up.
So here's my question for everybody in the room. How did it feel to have to write with your wrong hand?
Uncomfortable.
Comfortable. Glitchy. It takes a lot of thought and a lot of concentration. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the pen or pencil, whatever you brought, I want you to put back in your other hand, and I want you to repeat the process. Full first name, full last name, but with your regular hand. And then when you're done, put your hand up. Same thing, Jason. Just tell me when the majority have got their hand up.
Yep, majority have their hand up.
So how did it feel to write your name with your regular hand?
Easier.
Easier, right? It's second nature. Takes no thought or concentration. How did it get from the way it was when you were in grade 2 or grade 3 to the way it is today?
Practice.
Practice. I think you're wrong. I don't think it's practice. I think it's repetition. Now, some of you are saying, what's the difference? The difference is this. Practice you do in the safety of your own home, in an environment where it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. In order to get good at anything, it takes repetition. You have to do it, right, in an environment where you're going to make mistakes, and that's how you learn. Now, the reason I do this exercise, some of the stuff I'm going to share with you today, the first time you try it, it's going to feel like writing with your wrong hand. But if you want to get good at it, all you have to do is repeat the process, and repeat the process. So this is what happened to me in the summer 2002. I looked back on all my successes as a salesperson. I looked at every 6, 7, 8-figure deal. I looked at everything I could remember. And I said to myself, when was I good? When was I great? When was I just unstoppable? Where was I just completely lucky? And what I realized is 3 key things. The first thing I figured out is that it didn't matter what I was selling or who I was selling it to, the people I'm trying to sell to were always in one of 3 different buying modes. The first one's called status quo. This is when people have done the same thing the same way for so long as just simply keep doing the same old thing. You can think of this as path dependency. We all type using this QWERTY keyboard. That's the left-hand top row, the letters Q, W, E, R, T, Y. It is not the fastest way to type, but it's the way that we learn, so we keep doing it. And I think if I said that the odds that someone buys what you're trying to sell them when they're in this buying mode of status quo is pretty close to 0. Now, sometimes we get lucky. We talk to people that are on the other end of the spectrum, people that are actively engaged in a process of searching for alternatives. The first group, status quo, they're happy with what they have and they see no reason to change. The people on the other end of the spectrum, they are unhappy and they're doing something about it. The problem with this group is they've pretty much already decided exactly what it is they're going to buy. Now basically they're just looking for the cheapest provider. So the dilemma is that in many cases they're the vast majority of the way through the decision-making process before they ever talk to you. So these people that you get to that are in this buying mode of searching for alternatives, the impact of them being so far into the decision-making process is that the odds they buy from you is on average about 1 out of 6 or maybe 1 out of 7. The whole idea here is you got to find a way to get in early so you can help people figure out what is the problem they're really trying to solve. And this is what I call a window of dissatisfaction. These are the people that are unhappy with what they have, but they're so busy solving other problems, they haven't gotten to this problem yet. So in this window of dissatisfaction, when I did the research for my own company back in 2002, 2003, and I asked the salesperson or salespeople, I had 400 people respond to a survey. over 400. Over 200 were senior salespeople that were actually selling, and over 200 were senior sales managers who had a team. And I basically asked the question, if you were the first person in on a deal that was happening soon, emerging, right, you're the first one in, what were the odds you win the business? 2003, the number I got back was 75%. There is a research firm called Forrester. They did similar research in 2012, only instead of interviewing the seller, this time they interviewed the buyer. This is corporate America. They asked the question, how often did you, the decision maker, give the business to the person that was first in? And their number was 74%. So you were 5 times more likely to get somebody as a customer if you find a way to get there first. Not only are you more likely to get them as a customer, but you get the best customers. These are the customers that are loyal, they're profitable, and they tell their friends. I just want to stop here for a second, because this tell their friends is an important piece. The research says that word of mouth generates twice the revenue of all forms of paid advertising, right? By a factor of 2. If you want to learn about how to create more word of mouth for your business, there's a really good book by a guy named Jonah Berger, who is a professor, I think at Princeton, I've forgotten, I've already talked to him a couple of times. This will help you understand all about how can you go about creating more word of mouth for your business. So now, before I get started, I just want to see if anybody's got questions. The main point here is reaching somebody who's in what is called a window of dissatisfaction. Are there any questions about this window of dissatisfaction?
How do you find them?
How do you find them? That's a really good question. So, the people that are in the window of dissatisfaction, they've all had something happen to them that makes them more interested in becoming your customer. So I'm going to spend some time on the second half talking about this, right? But here's something I want you to also understand. The other piece I think is important is how do you know when you found them? So what happens when you talk to people who are in the window of dissatisfaction, they'll very often do one of 2 things. A, they'll say, you know what, I'm thinking about doing something with this. Why don't you phone me back in 6 months or phone me back in August? But when you phone them back later, guess what? They've done something with it. So when you hear someone say, I'm thinking of doing this, can we do something about it later? You got them in the window of dissatisfaction. When you hear people describe to you what they want, and they're using verbs to describe the outcome, instead of nouns to describe what they're buying, that also tells you you've got people in this window of dissatisfaction. So they'll say, I'm thinking about it, phone me later. That's one indicator. 2, they'll say, I want to get this done, instead of, I want to buy that. So for me, and any more questions before I go on, Jason?
Yeah.
So in any field, wouldn't people fluctuate between these states? Like, why would they be in one state at all the time?
Did you get that, Craig?
Did you hear that?
So good question. So what causes them to move is the question, right?
Yeah, I was thinking.
And they tend to move in a linear method, although on occasion they will move backwards. And I will give you about 10 minutes and I'll help you understand how they move through that process. They move through that process because very specific things happen in their lives. And I'll get to that. But before I do this, I just want to make sure that we focus. Any other questions before I move on, Jason? But that's a good question. I'll explain the answer.
I think a part of that question too, Craig, was depending on what it is that you're selling in the industry, are people more likely to move between these states from one to the other?
So there are some universal things that will cause people to move. Okay, and I'll give some examples. Maybe just by a show of hands, how many of you are what I would call a business to consumer, or have a business to consumer idea, selling to individuals? So you just put your hand up and Jason can sort of give me a ratio of what it is. So hands up if you're doing business to consumer, selling to individuals, people.
Most of the people in the room
Maybe
are.
put your hand down. How many of you are selling to other businesses? Or business to consumer?
Probably
Good.
75%.
So I have some
consumer.
really good business to consumer examples. Okay, perfect. So here's what I've learned. The right prospects have three things. You need to focus on a very specific group of people. Okay? Now before you turn someone into a customer, what do they need to have?
The need.
Sorry?
The need.
For what you're selling.
Did someone say
The need or
need? So a need is good, but more importantly, they have to have money. Because if they don't have money, they can't buy from you. Okay? Or access to money. But here's the thing. The best people, right, they have the money and they have the need. Those that are dissatisfied with the status quo for some reason are 10 times more likely to switch and then become your customers. But I want to make sure everybody understands when I mention status quo, I am not mentioning people who might be your competitors. I'm talking about people who would be your competition. And let me explain the difference. So let's pretend you own a jewelry store. Who are your competitors?
Every other jewelry store.
Every other jewelry store, I totally agree. But here's a different question. What is your competition?
the other jewelry companies?
Everything else they want to spend that money on.
Other jewelry companies, maybe? Let me walk you through a process. So, jewelry. Who buys more jewelry, men or women?
Men.
Men, yes. When do men buy jewelry?
Special occasions?
Yeah.
When they're bad.
Special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries. When they're in the doghouse, right? So here's the thing. The competition to jewelry is any other way a guy can say to his wife, I love you, or I'm sorry, spending the same money. So instead of jewelry, what could men buy? Flowers, chocolate, perfume. I asked this question a little while ago, and I asked the question, you know, what should a husband buy? And the wife said, a vacation. I hope he was listening. But here's a question for you. When it's a special occasion, what do men make for dinner? They make reservations. So if you want to understand this more, there's a really good article in Harvard Business Review, came out in 2004, that really helped me understand the whole idea is to focus on how do you take business away from the competition instead of competitors. Because if you compete with somebody else who's more established, what you're gonna say to someone, we're better, faster, cheaper. The people that have been around longer are gonna say, well, we're better, faster, cheaper. We've been around longer, so who are you gonna believe? So for me, whenever you can, you want to think about what is your competition, not what, or sorry, what is your competition, not who are your competitors? Does anybody have any questions about this concept?
What's an easy way for a new entrepreneur to identify
Let me
who
give
their
you-
competitors are? Or who their competition is?
So, or who the competition is? Yeah. So it's all the different ways to solve a different problem. I'm going to suggest that they ask, but let me give you a different example. And this is not very easy to do, okay? It is a challenge, but if you can do this well, you are on your way to finding people who are unhappy with the competition. But I want to give you an example about competitor competition. So, WestJet. WestJet is modeled after a company in the United States called Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines got started by flying between the major cities in Texas that are about 3 hours apart. So when the airline comes out, what did it view as its competition?
Vehicles.
Trains, buses.
Vehicles, people that were driving, right? Trains. So guess what happens? All you have to do is have a billboard halfway between Houston and Dallas. If you'd flown Southwest, you'd be there already. So once you understand the competition, you can find ways to fix things or find things that people aren't happy with. So for me, sales is like Formula One racing. Basically, it's all about getting there first. That car near the middle, that blue and yellow one that's in the pole position. What I can tell you is that car in the pole position, the odds that car wins just because it gets in the pole position, I think the 20-year average is something like 54%. So it's all about how do you get in front of the right people at exactly the right time. But the dilemma is this. And this was something I couldn't figure out. So it's the summer of 2002, I'm analyzing all these deals. And what I could not figure out is how can somebody be in this buying mode of status quo on Monday, be in a window of dissatisfaction on Wednesday, and all of a sudden start searching for alternatives on Friday? What had changed? What was different? What made them leave status quo? What I realized is it was this. Here's a married man going bald. And every day he gets older, heavier, frayer, balder. But he doesn't go out and buy Rogaine, the stuff that makes his hair grow back, until he experiences a very specific event. Anybody want to guess what that event is?
A girl makes a comment.
Meets a girl.
He's a married man,
Oh,
and all of a sudden he gets a girlfriend or he gets a divorce, right? And all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm back in the market, I need to grow my hair. So he said to himself, okay, I'm going to go to the drugstore, I'm going to go buy Rogaine. And he leaves his house, he's making his way to the drugstore, but between his house and the drugstore, he sees a gym. And all of a sudden he takes out a gym membership. So he leaves the gym, he's going to the drugstore still. Before he gets to the drugstore, he finds a men's store. Sells nice suits. He says, well, if I'm going to lose weight, I better buy a new suit. He buys new suits. He goes to the drugstore, he buys the Rogaine. He's on his way home. But between the drugstore and where he now lives, it's a Mercedes-Benz dealership. And on the way home, he buys himself a bright yellow Mercedes SLK. All of those things created by one single event. Let me give you a different example. Does anybody in the room sell life insurance? No, I'm assuming.
Nope.
So let me ask the question. From what I am told, there is one event, just one, that causes more people to buy life insurance than all of the other events combined. What is that event?
Death
Funeral.
family death.
Birth of a child, yeah.
Death. It is not death. The birth of a child. That as soon as you get that little yellow strip and a stick that you pee on, all of a sudden what do? You buy life insurance, you get a will, you give up your Mazda 323, you buy a Subaru station wagon, you leave your apartment and you buy a house. All of that because of one single event. So for me, it's all about understanding what are the events that cause people to leave, to go from one place to the next. So it turns out, when I first figured it out, I thought there's this event. Well, it turns out there's actually more than one. It turns out there's actually three of them. So the first event is when somebody wants to change. When I think of sales, I think of a sales funnel. Lots of people at the top, fewer at the bottom. When they get to the end, they turn into customers. So what happens is people have an event and they want to change. These are what I call funnel fillers. But just because somebody wants to change doesn't mean they will until they can afford to change, afford the time to look at what you got, or have the money to buy it. Now, when the first iPhone came out in the United States, I love technology. When the first iPhone came out in the United States, I saw one actually up on eBay for sale, $600. I love technology. I want the phone. I have more than $600 in my bank account. I could afford the phone. But I didn't buy it right away. Why not? Or I couldn't buy it right away. Why not? You want to guess?
You already had one.
Couldn't get out your money.
You didn't need to do that.
Yeah, well, so funnily enough, kind of, sort of, yeah. The reason I can't buy the phone is because my wife is Scottish. I love my wife, but we don't throw anything away. So yes, exactly right. I already have a phone. I couldn't justify the purchase to my wife, so I didn't buy the phone right away. But guess what happened? About 3 months later, my son, who was about 2.5 years old at the time, found my wife's really nice Motorola flip phone, and guess what he did? He broke it in half. And I went to my wife and I said, here, dear, you can have my really nice Sony Ericsson phone. I will go buy the iPhone. The same is true with all your prospects who you want to become customers. They have to want it, they have to be able to have the time to look at it, to buy it, and they have to somehow justify it to somebody else. If they don't have all of this, they won't become your customer. And I talked about this for a long time, but I was like this one guy in a mountain, but I was the crazy scientist. But luckily enough, about 7 years later in 2009, a firm called McKinsey did some research. They talked to 20,000 consumers in 3 continents and 5 completely different industries. And they figured out almost the exact same thing. Now, I admit they have a nicer visual, but what they have this inner circle called a loyalty loop, status quo, loyalty loop. People go round and round, do the same thing, until they have some trigger that causes them to have interest in what they do. And then people create what is called an initial consideration set. So this is when the guy says, okay, jewelry, chocolate, flowers, right, reservations, or a trip. So you need to find a way to get to people so you're part of that initial consideration set. Then what McKinsey says is people go to this active evaluation, and at some point at the end, there's a trigger where all of a sudden they make a decision. In my world, that's the decision, or a justified trigger. The only thing that's missing from this model, as far as I'm concerned, is people don't start the active evaluation until they have more time or until they have more money. In 2009, McKinsey came out with this. Then, actually, 2011, Google came along and figured out pretty much the exact same thing. They have a book that's free. It's about 75 pages. It's called The Zero Moment of Truth. It's free. I would go download it. It will teach you a lot about how did you find a way to be found by those people that have just had an event. So Google says there's this thing called the zero moment of truth. That's my window of dissatisfaction, created by what they call a stimulus. What we now know is actually a trigger. Now, what's interesting is that companies have figured this out, right? GE is a classic example. What Beth Comstock, their CMO, said, it applies whether you're selling refrigerators to consumers or jet engines to airlines. And the data pretty much backs it up. Now, most of the data that I focus on is in the business world because that's where most of my customers are. But basically, and I think this transfers very nicely, about 80% of new purchases are unbudgeted and unplanned. Something happened. People take money they would have spent on one thing and they put it on something else. So here's what happens. People have an event. They want to change. It puts something on their to-do list. The problem is it's way down their list so they don't get to it. But what does happen, as soon as they have the event, it turns on that thing called selective perception. Remember how I talked about when you buy a new car, what you see all over the place? You see that car. So now what happens is all the marketing that you've done, all of a sudden will jump out in front of them. So I have a Facebook page that I put aside called Trigger Event Marketing, and I've got on there some really good examples from companies who focus their marketing or advertising on one specific audience. So one of my favorite examples actually is TD Bank. They have a picture, and I don't have it in this presentation. They have a picture of a couple sitting on this green chair. That was their piece, right? Green things. And then they have across the top, 626, your wife says she's pregnant. 627, your apartment looks small. 628, you need a mortgage. I am a mentor for a group called Futurepreneur, and I have a lady I'm mentoring at Strathmore that has a store for home furnishings, and she's working on a door hanger, and the door hanger is going to be going up to all the apartment buildings around Strathmore on a regular basis. Are you moving? Because she's realized that when people move out of an apartment, they move into a house, their house feels empty, they're more likely to buy stuff. So I think it's really good to think about not just what are the events, but how can you market in a way to the people who have the event so they can see your marketing or advertising more often. So these events, they actually come in 3 flavors, okay? The first one, we do. We try to say we're better, we're faster, we're cheaper. The problem is it generally doesn't work. What works best is when people have a bad experience with something, very often caused by a change in something that happens within the competition. Change in people, a change in product, sometimes a material change in the provider, a lawsuit, bad press, merger, acquisition. People tend to jump right away. They leave based upon a bad experience. The hard part for us is they're hard to predict. We don't know when it happens. What I love is when there's a change inside an organization, or maybe in your case, a change inside a family, change in people, change in places, a change in priorities. So there was a lady I knew who used to do a lot of road riding. She rode a road bike, right, up and down the highway in Vancouver. But all of a sudden one day she bought a mountain bike. Why did she all of a sudden buy a mountain bike? Anybody want to guess?
Uphill and downhill.
Hit by cars.
Sorry?
Hit by a car.
Got hit by a car. No, she started dating a guy who was a mountain biker. It was me, right? So when there's changes inside families, that's something where people all of a sudden change. A change in geography, a change in priorities. I have some data points. I wasn't sure how many would be business to consumer or business to business, but I have a data point in the business to business world. People that are new in their job tend to make a lot of changes. The same is true actually in a consumer space. People want to change, but they can't afford to change until they experience several events. It might be the case where they get a promotion. Maybe they pay off their mortgage. Maybe their kids move out of the house. So all of these things are what cause people to go from one place to the next. So these events, 3 forms. 1, they want to change. 2, they can afford to change. 3, they can justify the change. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second before I get to a Q&A, and I want to tell you the 5 ways that people justify. I don't have a slide for this, so you're going to have to write it down. It's an acronym. It's called RIPES. R-I-P-E and S. So you want to write those letters down the piece of paper, not across. R-I-P-E and S. I'm going to start at the bottom. S. S stands for simplicity or time. The data I've seen says people will choose the vendor who's easiest to do business with almost a third of the time just because they're easier to do business with. P stands for productivity, being able to do more with the same amount of money. E stands for expenses, being able to do the same amount but with less money. I stands for image. R stands for risk avoidance. So risk avoidance, image, productivity, expenses, simplicity. And when people can justify the decision to somebody else, they'll then become a customer. So let me just stop here and see what questions people have about these events. Who's got questions?
Instead of waiting for someone to have that change happen to them, how do you work it so that you are predicting that and you just happen to be there before, like the second they have the problem, instead of, I don't know, that's that.
So can you predict it? I think it is predictable. Okay, in fact, here, I'll tell you how predictable I think it is. In my neighborhood, we have I live in a really nice neighborhood in Calgary. Not nice from as in really expensive, just nice that it's very family oriented. I'm on a crescent. There's 41 homes on my crescent. There are 34 kids on our street that are younger than my son, who is 10. 34. So when a couple moves onto the street, what does everybody think?
More kids.
You're gonna have kids. And sometimes it's funny because they go get a dog first, and you're like, yeah, okay, it's now a year that they're gonna have kids. So sometimes you can predict it. Okay? The best way for me, though, to predict it is to actually analyze the business that you win. So once you've gotten a few good customers, you will be able to analyze, ask them some questions. I'm actually going to walk you through a process called one sales analysis. It's going to help you analyze the business that you win, so you know exactly which are the events that bring you the majority of your business. Okay? Now, any other questions about these events?
Would it be beneficial when you're like looking for customers to actually let them know that an event took place, almost like you're engineering a situation for them to realize that they need to change?
So you can try that, but the problem often is that they won't listen to you. The best thing you can do is plant the seed that says, you know what, call me back when you get promoted. Call me back when you leave the house. Call me back when, because then they're much more likely to remember you when that event happens. Plus, it's beneficial because when they reach out to you after the event, they're much more likely to become your customer. And if you understand when that is, what you can do is you can actually ask for permission to say, hey, can I reach back out at some point in the future when I think the time might be better? The answer is almost yes. Now, the interesting thing for me is what I said is reach out. The data says that the vast majority of business owners, the vast majority, 97%, don't reach out. They're reactive. They hope their search engine optimization, their Facebook ads, their newspaper ads, they expect people to come to them. And the problem is it just doesn't work. You need to find a way to reach out to people, and you need to tell them what's the value of being your customer. I'm a big believer that everybody listens to the same radio station. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember a radio station was called WKRP, Cincinnati. Right. I remember Herb Tarlek, the sales guy in that, right? So he's got this polka dot tie and this striped pants and this plaid jacket. And what I remember the most about that show, he used to raffle off his paycheck so he could make more money than his paycheck actually had in it. So what I've learned about trying to get someone to become a customer, when the time is right, and when you get a chance to tell them what you do, you have to tell them what's in it for them. You have to tell them what they want to hear. So when I say that, here's what I mean. You want to tell them the value of being your customer. And you do that by using verbs to describe the outcome, not nouns that describe the product or the service. It's a process that I call a 7-second sale. I wrote a blog post for a company a while ago about the 7-second sale, and it caused a bit of a storm because people are saying, there's no way you can win a sale at 7 seconds. And I'm like, oh yeah? Watch, I'll show you how. And just like I got that guy, Tim Draper's attention in 30 seconds, you can do the same thing to get a customer's attention in 7. Now, I just want to stop for a second and talk about the guy who gave me the $1 million. Because after I got the money, I actually went and I asked him, what did he see in that 5 minutes that made him say, this is something I would invest $1 million in? And what Tim told me was, it crazy, you know what? It didn't take me 5 seconds. It took me less than 30. And I didn't just decide to give you $1 million. I actually on the spot decided I was going to give you 5. Because I realized that as you grew, you're probably going to need more money. And basically what happened was, I saw that you had an idea you were totally committed to, and you were going to go away and make this happen. And I really just wanted to come along for the ride. So while energy sells, passion persuades. So I think if you're passionate about your idea, and if you're passionate about the people that you help, and if you're passionate about the difference that you make, then people are much more likely to become your customers. So you need to figure out, how do you describe to someone the value of being your customer using verbs, not nouns. And I want to give you an example. It's one of my favorite stories to tell about selling. When I started my company down in California, it was an information exchange for salespeople. And on one side of the exchange, I had all these salespeople that knew of things their customers want or wanted, but it wasn't what that salesperson sold. And they would bring me all these opportunities. The dilemma I had was I didn't have enough businesses on the other side of the equation I could give these opportunities to. So I said to myself, how do I solve this problem? Like, I need to find a way to get a whole bunch of small businesses in so I can give them leads. So what I thought about was, where can I find a collection of these small businesses? Where do they all hang out? What do they all have in common? Where can I find a bunch of them all at once? And then I had an epiphany. And my epiphany was that there's this thing called American Express. And a lot of small business owners have American Express cards. I was like, well, that's not hard. All I have to do is call the CEO of American Express and ask him if he would like to use what I have for his customers. Now, the CEO of American Express, back then his name was Alfred Kelly. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I get the phone number for Alfred Kelly? So luckily enough, I actually was an American Express card holder. So I phoned customer service, and I got a lady, I think her name was Cheryl. One was Cheryl, one was Diane, but I got a lady, her name was Cheryl, and I said, hi Cheryl, my name's Craig Elias. I'm an American Express card holder, and I'm looking for somebody in the company called Alfred Kelly. I'm hoping you can help me find him. She says, well, let me look. She looks in the system, you can hear typing in the background, right? She comes back and says, well, look, Craig, I don't have a guy named Alfred Kelly, but I have a guy in the system named Al Kelly. Would you like his phone number? I took his phone number. Now, I phone the number that Cheryl gives me. Who am I going to get when I phone Alfred Kelly, the CEO of American Express? His assistant. Her name was Diane. And I went to Diane and said, hi Diane, my name is Craig Elias. I am the chief executive officer of a company that helps businesses attract new customers faster, generate more revenue per customer, and, so what was the other one? New customers faster, more revenue per customer, and keep current customers longer. And I'd actually just read something earlier that day what Visa and MasterCard were doing, and I said to her, I've been watching what Visa and MasterCard have been doing in the marketplace. I think Alfred would have interest in what we do. Did I tell her what I sold?
No.
Did I use any nouns to describe what I did? No, I used verbs to describe the outcome. You know what I got? I got his cell phone number and his email address. So we need to figure out, how do we get people to buy verbs? When you tell somebody the impact or value of being your customer, when you use verbs, they're going to ask you one question. How? How do you do that? And I described this process in this article called 7 Second Sale. If you go to 7secondsale.com, I have posted the article there. You can go read it. We don't have enough time to go through all of it, but in this whole process now about these events, does anybody have any questions about events before I go on to the last thing I wanted to share today?
No questions.
No questions, okay. So, in the summer of 2002, I did something different. Something as a salesperson I had never done before. And it actually helped me understand all of this. For 20 years, I had sales managers, and my sales managers taught me something. They had a theory. That theory was, if you ever lose the business, you never want to lose the lesson. And what I spent my time doing as a salesperson is I would analyze all the business I would lose, hoping I could figure out how I might be able to win. But in the summer of 2002, I didn't do that. I stopped asking questions about why I lost deals. I started asking questions about why I won deals. A little while ago, I saw this quote by a guy named Julian Gordon, and basically he says, you can read this, how far will the right answers to the wrong questions get you? So I figured out what I'd done was this thing called a one sales analysis. Now, in the summer of 2002, I thought to myself, hey, I got lucky. I need to find a way to learn more about this thing called the one sales analysis. So why don't I go to the internet and just see what other people are writing about this process? So I went to Google in the summer of 2002, and I typed between quotes. When you put words between quotes, it's those words together in that exact order. So I did a search for the phrase between quotes, sales analysis, and I found about 1 million pages on the internet about sales analysis. And I said to myself, okay, I am never going to read 1 million pages. Let's make this fewer. Let's go just look, because I'm curious anyway, how many pages talk about what I have been taught, which is called a lost sales analysis. So I went to Google, typed it up, between quotes, lost sales analysis, summer 2002, and I found about 50,000 pages. And I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to read all those, so forget that idea. Why don't I just focus on the one sales analysis? I replaced the word lost in the phrase that I searched for. So now I have the word won, W-O-N. I want to analyze the business I have won, so I analyzed using a one sales analysis, put that between quotes, hit enter. The summer 2002, how many pages do you think I found on the internet that talked about analyzing your wins by using a process called one sales analysis? Anybody want to guess?
None.
0.
2. All the time that people spend analyzing the business they lose, no one spends any time analyzing the business they have won. So I have a process, it's called one sales analysis. What happens is, you win a piece of business, right? As soon as you can, you want to ask a few very simple questions. People have an event they want to change, they're motivated. So you need to ask the question, what event or what events led up to this purchase? You know what the word event, you can ask the word what change or what changes, you know, brought you into my store today or made you buy. What happens though is as time goes on, that emotion dissipates. So you've got to find a way to get to people sooner. And what I've realized when I asked question number 1, people told me about event number 2. And these were the ones where people could afford to change. Well, I wanted to get to someone sooner when they decided they wanted to change. So I had to learn to ask a different question. The second question is, when did these events happen? So my wife gets pregnant, I move back, she's been in the same house for a while, we decide we're going to paint the hallway. What do you think happened after we painted the hallway?
Gonna paint more rooms.
Oh yeah, the kitchen, down into the stairs, the family room. As soon as you paint the kitchen, you look up on your step-full ceiling, you're like, wow, that is really gray. And all of a sudden, you painted half the house because you painted one room. Okay? So ask the question, when I painted the hallway, that's when it happened. The third question is, what made you choose us? I did not ask a why question, because what I've been told and what I believe is the why questions tend to make people defensive. So I've learned to ask what or how questions. What made you choose us? And if you listen, people will describe the value they got out of being your customer. Fourth question. The challenge is that there are all these obstacles and hurdles to becoming your customer. Let me just give you an example. So let's pretend it's 1996. And let's pretend, for those of you who are younger in the room, you're still old enough to drive. And you're driving to work, and you hear a song on the radio that you like. Right? I'm just going to do something here. Hang on a second. I'm actually going to make this as real as I can. Hold on. I'm going to go find some music because I'm going to pick on a song. Okay. Music. Where's my music? I got my iPhone in front of me. Just type in music. So you're driving to work. Okay. You got $20 in your pocket. You hear a song you like on the radio, and all of a sudden, let me just see if I can go find this one. Here we go. Here's a good one. If I get it to play. You hear the song on the radio. And you say to yourself, I want to buy that song. Now, you're driving to work, you got $20 in your pocket, it's 1996. Where do you have to go to buy the song?
HMV.
You gotta go to HMV, you gotta go to a record store. So when you finally get to the record store 3 weeks later, right? Do you still remember the name of the song? No. And do you remember the $20 you had in your pocket? What happened to the $20?
Spend it.
You spent it on something else, right? So for me, what I've learned is I need to ask a question. Ask the question, what can we do to make it easier to become our customer? Because you want to make it as easy as possible. Today, if you want to buy a song, you just simply, when you hear a song you like, you take your phone, you open up Shazam, you take the phone, you stick it next to the speaker, it identifies the song, and with a push of a button, you can buy the song or the entire album. They've made it easier and easier to become a customer. What should question number 5 be?
What will make you come back?
What will make you come back? Okay, I like the direction that you're going. The question that I think is important is we need to understand, are people completely happy with what they bought? So my question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate what you bought and the process you went through? And if people give you an 8, what's your next question?
How can we make it a 10?
What was that?
How can we make it a 10?
How do we make it a 10? We don't make it better. How do we make it a 10? So when you win a piece of business, this is what you want to do. Now, if you get to the point where you're busy, you don't want to analyze all your wins. You just want to analyze your best wins. So you want to analyze where someone decides quick. It was easy to figure out what they really wanted. They paid a higher price, and if you ask them to be a reference, they're willing to be a reference. Anybody who meets 3 or more of those criteria, when that happens, odds are you got to those people while they are in this thing called a window of dissatisfaction. So now, before I go on, does anybody have questions about this one sales analysis?
Greg, I have a question in terms of the usefulness of the state of inertia, or when the person is not actually desiring. So I was just trying to run through that example when your wife bought the mountain bike. So it's true that the event of meeting you caused her to go and want a mountain bike, but at that state of desire, she's in a rush. So she would go to a place like a bike store, like Canadian Tire or what have you, and that place is already filled with all your competitor bikes. Now she is faced with the question, which one should I buy? And at that point, there's very little your company can do to persuade her to desire your product. However, if she had in the past when she didn't want the mountain bike, the company, let's say XYZ or BMW had, or BMX I think, had taken time to educate her about this product, where she doesn't want it, but she just learns about it in the state of calm, state of rest. Then in that point, right? So I'm thinking like the other states are just as important if you want to sell, and the middle section is only important as so much as for being available for that sale transaction to happen. However, the game is already done at that point.
So here's where I think you're going. The question is, how can I find a way to build a relationship with someone before they actually want my product so I become the preferred vendor?
Yeah, so I'm saying,
Okay.
yeah, the middle is, yeah, so the...
Let me give you a few things to do, and I want to be a little careful of time because I do want to end at 8.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I totally agree with the educate thing. So the whole idea is, if I owned a bike shop, what I would do is I would have a form on my website that would say 10 things you need to know before you buy a bike, or the 10 measurements you need to take before you go and look at a bike you want to buy, or how to buy a bike that will not hurt when you ride it. And these are the things that you can do to start establishing the relationship and create awareness for what you have before there's somebody else. And then what ends up happening is consumers actually have a little bit of guilt. And they feel like, hey, you helped me, I owe you, therefore I should give you something back, I will give you my business. So if you can find a way to figure out who is looking for a bike, or who is thinking of your stuff, and how do you find a way to get it early and create this preference, then you're off to the races. Now, I'm going to go off topic just for a couple of minutes because there's something here that I think is important that hasn't been talked about. And it's called propinquity. I'll spell that. Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity talks about the impact of nearness. So nearness has 2 impacts. One is about location. So people who live or work close to where you are more likely to choose you, but also people who are like you are more likely to choose you. So when there is something you have in common with the other person, common interests, common values, common aspirations, that's one of the ways that you actually can create this preferred status. So one of the things I think is really important, I don't have it in this presentation, but when people want to learn about you, we need to make it really easier. You need to make it really easy for them to learn about who you are, not what you do. If you go find me, if you go to Google, okay, you're going to look me up, you're going to find me on social media. LinkedIn comes up first. I'm a big fan of social media. I don't think people are on Twitter looking for Craig Elias. They're on Google looking for Craig Elias. But they find my Twitter profile. And what do they see? They see a picture of my son, right? And these Harry Potter goggles and the station wagon in the back. They find my Facebook profile. They see a picture with me and a picture of my white-faced dog that I had for 15 years. His name is Casper. They find my LinkedIn profile. They realize that I'm a guy who places value on persistence, creativity, family. They scroll down my LinkedIn profile. They see that I'm a Zamboni driver. I'm a past president of my community association. I'm a Cub Scout leader. And they go, wow, this is a guy I'd rather give business to than someone who's just in business. So finding a way to create those relationships. And unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about today, but there's something here about propinquity, and if you do a Google search, you'll find it's about the impact of nearness, psychological nearness, as well as physical nearness. Now, I came with the intent, the time that I had to do 3 things. 1, share with you the impact of timing, showing up in front of the right people at exactly the right time. 2, I wanted to turn on selective perception. Hopefully now you will start noticing all the events that happen in a target market that could convert someone into a customer. But the reason I wanted to come today was I wanted you to jump. Okay? I want you to do something with what you just learned. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask everybody in the room to pair up with somebody they don't know. Go find somebody you don't know, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a commitment to the other person. What's one thing you're going to do differently based upon what you just heard in the last hour and 14 minutes? So let's take 60 seconds, go find somebody in the room, go tell somebody else, what are you going to go do differently? Go. I have no idea how many of you can still hear me.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can get everybody to go back and take their seat. So there's something else that's important in entrepreneurship and being successful as a business owner. One of the things that's most important is if you want something, you have to what?
Work for it. Go for it.
Ask. You just have to ask. What's the worst thing someone says to you?
No.
No! No does not mean never. It just means not today. So here's the thing. I think it's really important that you ask. And it's so important that I'm actually going to live up to that. I'm actually going to have an ask for everybody in this room. In fact, I have two of them. Here's what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you to hold everybody else, the other person, accountable for the commitment they just made to you. But here's something else I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you to do something for yourself. I'm going to ask you to hold yourself accountable for the commitment you just made to the other person. Here's all my contact information. If you'd like a free copy of my book that talks about this and all kinds of other stuff that was in the back end, I just explained to you the first 3 chapters. What did I figure out in that summer of reflection? The last 4 chapters is basically, what did I do for 20 years and just be lucky as a sales guy? Send me a LinkedIn connection request, and I will send you the entire book. Okay, I'll send you a link where you can go download the book as a PDF, and you can put it in your e-reader. That's what I came to talk about. Hopefully, everybody got something. And if you have questions, all you have to do is what?
Ask.
Ask. Jason, I am done.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Craig. Fantastic presentation. So you go and enjoy. You're going to the symphony tonight, the orchestra?
No, I have to go get my son. I would normally go away and make ice, but my wife plays French horn for the orchestra, and tonight's the opera, and they play for the opera.
Oh.
So I'm going to go pick my son up from Cubs. I'm a Cub Scout leader. I got tonight off. I'm going to pick him up. We're going to do some stuff at home. But normally I would, after this, I would go make ice. But Wednesday night is my night.
Well, thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. All right,
You're
guys.
welcome. Good luck, everybody. Enjoy the journey. Bye.
So we're going to take a real quick 10-minute break in case you guys need to use the washroom. Just so you guys know, in case you don't, there's bathrooms right out here, and if you go to the other side of the atrium, there's some as well. Be back by 10 after at the absolute latest, and we'll get into our next presentation.